All right, so you finally actually saw Tenet. It's out here in movie theaters, but I'm still kind of hesitant about going to see a movie, especially knowing the gross budget theaters that are open right now. Like I've literally, you walk in and smell cigarette smoke in a movie theater. So that isn't really my like
The
coronavirus
seal
special.
of quality.
Yeah. So like I'm still waiting. So, but you actually saw Tenet, so please go ahead and tell me.
Yeah, I mean,
what you thought.
we might talk on this later, but yeah, I'm just
When
gonna.
I eventually see it in the year 2023, then we will probably do. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna do a really brief overview on it. I just want to say I think I ended up coming away liking it. The thing that I feel bad about with this is the narrative of this movie kind of just got totally effed up, as so many things have from COVID, but like I feel like since so much of Tenet was kind of clouded in secrecy to begin with, and it didn't really kind of have a image or a message or anything it was going to convey, like it's now just thought of as the COVID failure, and like this like is almost like a symbol of the death of movie theaters right now, and maybe like Christopher Nolan's hubris, but
That not even Tenet could save the movie theater.
yeah, I mean, apparently I've been seeing headlines that like theaters are actually worse off because they tried to reopen two-screen Tenet than if they had just stayed closed for a while. So it's not looking good. I do feel terrible, and it sucks because it's like I do get what Nolan wanted, because this definitely seems like a movie that like really does need to be experienced on screens and get the full theatrical thing. But everything that's going on, I don't think no movie is worth your life or anyone else's and stuff like that. So I almost did wish they'd hurry up with the VOD release of this movie, because I think also, despite Nolan kind of having cemented himself as like the savior of the cinema, he made this movie that probably would very much benefit from the ability to rewind or watch twice or have subtitles included, because I know the big knock against him, and especially with this movie, has been the sound mixing, which yes is definitely not mixed well enough. I feel like a lot of the negative reviews that were coming out with the movie were from people that were so confused by what was going on that they didn't kind of understand the stakes of it, which I totally get, and I think I got enough of a grasp of it to follow what was going on, and yeah, so basically my whole thing with it is try to divorce yourself from all the other imagery that you thought when you're going into it. It's a cool movie. I think it's definitely got its flaws. It's like a little bit of a mix of like the best and worst of Nolan. It's a weird, like all of Nolan's movies have a time gimmick, and he does have a very specific time gimmick in this one, and it is different than anything he's tried before. It's strange to me because it's a remarkably low-tech gimmick that he's using for this $200 million movie. But it's definitely like a lot of it's up there on screen. Like, the stuff that he uses is real and it feels real, and that's like super admirable. And I would say, even if the effect of the thing that is kind of the focus of the movie isn't as cool visually as, say, something like Inception, I thought the concept was intriguing. And the other main thing is like, it's very apparent that the concept of this movie is so convoluted and kind of hard to convey that, I think the other big knock against this movie so far is that there is like very little characterization in it. The main character, is it John David Washington? Denzel Washington's
I think
kid?
John David Washington.
Yeah.
That sounds John David.
I think it's John David. I by the way, this is the first movie I've ever actually seen him in, and he is fucking awesome. He's.
I thought you saw Black Klansman.
I haven't seen it yet. Yeah, that's the thing is, I haven't watched Ballers either, and I kept on hearing he was really good.
I've seen a lot of Ballers. I never saw Black Klansman either, but I've seen a lot of Ballers.
Yeah, I've been hearing that he's good for a while, but this is the first movie I've seen him in, and he is great, man. And it's interesting because he is a like purposefully like kind of blank slate main character. The main character, like you never hear his name in the whole movie, but like apparently in the script he's just referred to as the protagonist. And it's like,
Okay, so he does. There is no. Well, I'm watching. I'm looking at the trailers, and I haven't seen it yet. Obviously, I mentioned it earlier, but is he like ex-military or something?
Oh,
Like, or is he? Because he seems to be recruited.
don't even
into
tell
something
you.
weird, right?
Like it's he's some sort of spy. Like all the details of the plot are very purposefully stripped down to the most baseline. Like it's almost like cliff notes of like a movie, so the movie can be in service of this weird concept. So like everything is like it's not really a spoiler, but we had been actually mentioned this on our last podcast, but this movie is kind of like a James Bond, Christopher Nolan style. Like it is a spy movie that is like like that has this weird like quantum physics concept attached to it. So it kind of goes on the cliff notes of everything, all the scenes that you would expect from a James Bond film. So it's like James Bond, there's an opening incident, and the spy is pulled into this one place where he's got to talk to this one person, and there's a character that's the scientist that explains this device or this concept to him, and so it kind of follows the beats of a 007 movie, and I think it kind of assumes that you know a lot of what to expect from those, so it kind of doesn't go too far into them. Like the closest thing to an emotional arc in the movie is the female lead, who's Elizabeth Debicki, I think, who's good, and she's like kind of like the typical, like Nolan kind of has the same archetype for all of the female love interests in all of his movies. Like she's definitely kind of fits squarely into that. But so like the whole emotional arc of the movie kind of hinges on her, and she's kind of like the damsel in distress. But like, so there's like a lot of things that happen that just like you kind of know what beats to expect. So the movie tells you just enough of them, but kind of doesn't go on too in depth on the other stuff. It is like little, like there's definitely some scenes that could be trimmed. There's some scenes that like are delivering a ton of exposition, and yes, that's when the sound mixing is too low and you kind of miss major important pieces of information. But like I said, I think when people are able to watch this and rewind this and see it with subtitles, they'll be a lot more forgiving. And yeah, like the movie itself kind of like, because it's got that 007, you have a little bit more of a suspension of disbelief. So some of the set pieces are like very convoluted, but they make sense in that you forgive them because you know that this is all in service of just making this convoluted premise make sense. So especially in the end of the movie where it really goes hard on this time concept that is kind of central to the movie, that's where it feels like the movie is less of a movie itself and more of just an excuse to see. It's kind of like a little bit of a tribute to cinema, because it is like this idea is kind of inherently cinematic, but it is like much more of a, like your, I don't know, like your professor in your physics, you know, a high level course is trying to blow your mind. So it feels like a thought experiment. And so like Nolan basically goes through great lengths to try to convey the ideas of this experiment, and sometimes like to the point where it's just like you literally have characters kind of like drawing diagrams on chalkboards to kind of illustrate it, and like there's a lot of stuff with the color red and blue to kind of delineate which characters are doing this one thing and which characters are doing this other thing. And so it's like it's almost laughable at certain points, the lengths that they have to go to try to spell out this thing that is still inherently confusing. And I'm not even totally sure if I fully grasp everything, but so long the short of it.
Where is it on the scale of confusing between Memento, Interstellar, and Inception? Like how frustratingly clockwork and confusing is it?
I would say that it is probably like at least conceptually the hardest to wrap your head around, but I feel like it's still not quite as messy as Interstellar. Like I liked Interstellar, but I thought that movie had a lot of was kind of a mess in a lot of different ways. For this, I think Nolan knows that he's got a messy premise to kind of grapple with, so he tries to strip away most of the other stuff that would get in the way of you trying to understand this plot. I don't know. That's kind of why I feel like, when you watch it, I think we need to do another review, because it's like, even if it's not a perfect concept or a perfect execution, the best thing I like, from Nolan movies is if they give you kind of food for thought to kind of ponder over after the credits have rolled. And I was kind of pondering this a lot after the credits had rolled. So, I think it was a little bit. It's like I said, barely a movie, more of a thought experiment, and that's the part I liked about it.
Do you think it's better served as, I guess I'm worried he's gonna get into this weird Shyamalan territory of what will be your next weird concept, like J.J. Abrams TED Talk idea box,
right?
Stuff, where it's like, I just want to go like see a James Bond film that doesn't have weird time and space,
right?
3-dimension. Do you think the Nolan fanboys will defend this to death, that it's worth kind of the weird, bizarre concepts, or do you think the film without the premise, does the movie work without this premise? Could they have just made John David Washington is a spy and Robert Pattinson is some sort of assistant or helper or something, and he has to solve some problem? Could any of that exist without kind of the hokey time travel, whatever?
Well, so I think it could have, but I don't think it would have been a Christopher Nolan movie, because the one thing is, like, I feel like even though Christopher Nolan's really, really good at doing his like weird little watch, like everything is synchronized and works perfectly and snaps into place when you need it to, kind of thing. The big knock against him has always been he needs to have things like exposition dumps and montages and kind of rug pulls and stuff like that, because he doesn't want you to realize that the certain flaws of his, which are sometimes either characterization, like he's not fantastic with humor. He has funny bits in his movies, but sometimes they can come off as really forced. He's not fantastic with action either. Like, I mean, he does cool car chases, but his hand-to-hand combat stuff, even though actually I thought it was pretty good in this, but like thinking back to the Dark Knight movies, compared to like, say, other modern action directors, he's weirdly like a lot more impressionistic with the way he cuts stuff, and I think it actually works pretty well. Like he gets an amazing amount of tension from that. Like that's kind of one of the things he did with Dunkirk, is like that whole movie was editing, and it was amazing that they were able to make such a brutal and gripping war movie that was also PG-13. But I think when it comes to certain things like spatial geography and actually like knowing where every character is at every moment, he's not always fantastic with that. I think he was actually pretty good with that in this movie, but in general, can you think of a Christopher Nolan movie if they just stripped out all of the intellectual stuff? Like, I feel like that's less appetizing, and then it kind of begs the question, like, why are you hiring him for,
Well, I agree, because I think, Interstellar, it could work if he just did 50% Nolan. I think it could still work. I think it'd be more of a, I don't know if I feel like it'd be more generally commercially successful, where it's ingestible by more people. You know what I mean? Like Interstellar is just, it's weirdly high.
Dude, did you know the story behind Interstellar? Because
what, his story, like writing it or developing it?
Yeah, because it was originally supposed to be a Spielberg script, and they changed a whole bunch of shit, like, from the original draft, and the original draft actually sounds a little cooler than what they did. But, like, that's the thing, is, like, I think that movie was going for heart so much, and the, once again, the concepts, the quantum physics or space-time concepts and everything like that, that stuff's always really cool, and I felt like so much of his movies, especially things like Interstellar, were kind of like you can see the plot really going the extra step to try to justify making these concepts work. That really, it's just like, oh, like a scientist thought of this concept, now let's kind of like work a movie around it. And then like the failings of the movie I thought really came from a lot of the attempts to be emotional, which kind of worked, but it felt kind of weirdly pandery for Nolan, you know what I mean? Like,
you mean in Interstellar specifically?
yeah, like I felt like that
with his daughter and McConaughey and the daughter and everything.
Yeah, like I think some of it worked, but like that's the stuff where it felt like I could feel him trying more so than I think in almost any of his other movies, you know? But like I could see Spielberg doing that shit like in his sleep, you know what I mean? And so you know, but yeah, that's always, I think, like I think ever since Interstellar he's kind of taken that note and has seemed to, like, both Dunkirk and Tenet are very sparse when it comes to like characterization. Like it's a little bit more like you kind of just immediately empathize with the character because they're in this dramatic situation or something like that, and you kind of like figure out who they are as the movie goes on, you know?
How do you know what the runtime was? Was it 2 hours plus?
I think it was like 2.5 hours. It's definitely like longer than your average movie, and it definitely didn't need to be quite as long as it was, but it wasn't too bad. I wasn't checking my watch too much, I think, until like towards the end, I would say.
So what do you think? Is it Uncut Gems level of disappointing, or just if you're listening, that's a
Yeah.
that's a throwback.
Yeah.
That's a deep cut joke.
Check out our episode from December or something.
Yep. Go check out the Uncut
said.
Gems episode where we loved it, but we thought it would be better, and we got murdered.
Well, so this is like the opposite for me, because I think once again, between pandemic and the surprisingly kind of mixed reviews, I didn't really have huge expectations going into this, and I was pleasantly surprised. I got to say, I personally, I always think, Inception's like a little overrated, so I actually think this is better than Inception in my Nolan rankings. If I had to guess, you know.
Is it better than the recent run of James Bond films, which I guess would be the closest comparison, kind of comparable thing? Yeah, see, like, I mean, you look at it, it looks like a James Bond movie.
It definitely does.
So does it give you that, like,
I mean, you know, they're not as fun as a James Bond movie. I'm not as big of a James Bond head as I think a lot of people, but like, you know, I've seen the recent ones, and these are kind of weirdly a little bit more grounded in reality in some ways. You know, if you're trying to divorce yourself from the fact that the time concept is totally weird and batshit crazy and definitely not realistic. Yeah, they're not quite as fun. Like, I feel like, you know, once again too, like, Nolan needs to throw in some weird puzzle editing technique in there, because like I don't think he's good at like just kind of doing the tongue-in-cheek stuff as much. Like it's got a little bit of that, like, you know, brooding self-seriousness that you expect from all of his movies at this point, you know.
Did Hans Zimmer do the score?
No, this was somebody else. I can't remember his name, but he's the same guy that did the Black Panther soundtrack. It's like something Jan Jorgensen or something like that. But it was really good. The score was one of the high points for me, and it's the same thing, you know, like it seems like all the scores for all the Nolan movies kind of tie into the whatever weird time concept is there too. So like the score for this one is really propulsive, but it seems like it's almost being played backwards too. So it's really cool and memorable. I had it kind of running in my head, and there's this cool little bit at the beginning. It's not like a spoiler, but like it's like the movie starts out like with orchestra music playing, and then you realize it like fades into an orchestra playing the music. Like there's this like cool little meta moment that it kind of plays with the soundtrack in the beginning that kind of sets the tone for the fact that the movie itself is kind of meta. So yeah, it's interesting. You know, like once again, there's no other movies out for me to like compare it to really, but I enjoyed it because it has given me like a interesting concept to ponder over for the last couple of weeks. So.
Well, it sounds like you recommend it.
Yeah, I would definitely say, like, you know, obviously safety first. I would wait till it comes out on VOD sometime soon, hopefully, if they're smart. And yeah, I would say give it a try. I think it's totally worth a rent, and try to go in with an open mind, I guess. And low expectations.
I think low expectations are the absolute foundation.
Yeah.
For every piece of content that we certainly ingest and produce.
Yeah, I mean, that's just keep that bar so low. All you got to do is just easily step over it, and you will be happy in life. That's my philosophy.
Well, there you go. Wiser words never spoken. Thank you guys so much for checking out our quasi review discussion. It's weird just because it's a movie that, you know, we're trying to be very diplomatic and calm about. You know, a lot of people still haven't gotten a chance to see it, but it's a weird blockbuster movie, so it's just a totally weird, crazy time. So we appreciate you guys, and hopefully you kind of understand what we're going with here. But thank you guys so much for listening. We appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, please just throw us a like, throw us a subscribe, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks
Guys. Dope.